All right. Welcome back to the Joe and Co podcast. We actually took a week off of recording last week due to some family issues of mine. And, something that's kind of brought to my mind was we talked about in our first few episodes, like what our ideal dream guest would be. And one of my ideal guests is just going to have to say that. Last week had my grandfather pass away. I'm going to go ahead and read this. James Dan VanBuskirk, go by Dan, 84, passed away Saturday, March 15th, 2025, surrounded by family. Dan was born on Sunday, March 24th, 1940 in Lockwood, Missouri to James, Hugh, and Iva Mae VanBuskirk. Dan was united in marriage to Mary and Francis Clement on March 30th, 1963. They were married for 60 years until Marion's passing in 2023. Dan was proud to serve his country in the United States Air Force. Once leaving the Air Force, he worked at Beech Aircraft for a period of time. Dan had vast knowledge, ability, and talent for working and fixing vehicles, sharing that talent with many companies over the course of his career. Dan also spent many years as a reserve deputy with the Butler County Sheriff's Department. Dan enjoyed learning to fly, earning his pilot's license. He loved spending time with his family and friends, sharing his love for the Lord, going camping, riding dirt bikes, going to car shows, and building his 1923 Model T Roadster. Dan is survived by his son Vance and Carolyn VanBuskirk, daughter Lucille Fry, grandchildren Joseph and Danielle Fry, William Timothy Fry, Avery VanBuskirk, Kathleen Dewis, Elizabeth VanBuskirk, and Emily Fry. 5 great-grandchildren with 1 great-grandchild on the way, his brothers Bill and Daryl VanBuskirk. He's preceded in death by his parents, wife, brother, Hugh Douglas VanBuskirk, and sister Mary Jean Bocock. And then it gives the information on the funeral. By the time this podcast airs, that funeral will have already happened, and in a brief, 2 minutes, we just summed up a human being's entire life. It just doesn't seem like enough. Give you a little bit of story. Some people know their grandparents very well. Some people grew up with them right there, and some people met the grandparents or once or twice, or they were already passed when they were born. I was fortunate enough, as the obituary said, I was the oldest grandchild by like a wide margin. And so, my grandparents really did take a major hand in helping raise me. And my grandfather was that person. He was that big male role model in my life. So this has been a bit of a deal. And, a lot of what I've learned, a lot of how I've grown up as a human being is the positives are from my grandpa. There is some negatives too, our love for ice cream. Not always the best for us, but
Did he have a favorite?
Vanilla, just straight vanilla ice cream. Well, okay, the more vanilla, the better. Because when they invented vanilla bean, it was like all was set right with the world.
Like that home style vanilla.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He taught me how to make homemade ice cream.
Was there at least favorite ice cream?
I don't think there was.
It's hard to do.
I'm trying to think of like if there was like a flavor or something you would put in ice cream that he didn't like, but he did have a definite sweet tooth all the way through. I think my grandpa's greatest character defect was that he liked his steak well done, meaning he didn't actually really like steak. He'd much prefer like a pot roast or something like that, a little more country, home cooked meal kind of thing. He certainly didn't care that much for his well done steaks. So, as it said, my grandpa was in the Air Force. He went in, served 3.5 years, was actually honorably discharged. And I don't know, he was right between like Korea and Vietnam. When he told me the story, he went ahead and enlisted to avoid being drafted, so he could kind of pick what he wanted to do. But he only served 3.5 of his 4 years, and they honorably discharged. I believe it had to do with his dad passing away. I don't really know how that really worked. He was the oldest. He was the oldest in his family, which I can relate to. He was the oldest of 5, which I'm the oldest of 5. He had 1 little sister and 3 little brothers, and grew up. Of course, they said, he was born in Lockwood, Missouri when he's about 8. They bought a little bit of land and moved a house onto it. And that's the house that, as far as if I understand how this all happened, I think it's the house that he lived in till last week. Obviously he moved away from his folks' house. And then when they passed, he moved back, into that same area. I even got to meet his mom when I was a little kid. And you think of like the smallest, nicest little old lady, like just wonderful, sweet lady. That's who his mom was. His dad had passed like a long time before that. And apparently, I don't mean to speak ill of anybody, but apparently that guy was kind of scary, like real bad temper. And I never really saw that from my grandpa. Like he was super even, easygoing, that was just who he was. And maybe it wasn't always that way. I mean, he was in his 40s when I was born, so it gives you a little time to calm down. But that's the man I knew was never a real high-strung individual. He taught me a ton of things, and I don't know how to put this in a proper timeline. And I do want to say that there's imperfection in memory, particularly the memory of stories that I heard that I wasn't there for, but trying to learn things from his life and keep his memory, and learn everything I can. I think it's, this is probably the episode of the podcast that I'll replay over and over and over to keep my memories as fresh as they can, but if any family members notice that something wasn't said quite right, or I got a detail wrong, I'd be very open to correction because I'm just trying to remember. One of the things I learned from my grandpa really early on was that it is, that we don't expect that much from kids these days. I'm not a great welder. I can weld. And, we just learned it that, I just showed you some welding this weekend. Apparently my grandfather learned how to weld when he was 6. And when I say learn to weld, I mean absolutely unsupervised. And what he described to me is not a machine that I'm familiar with or how it worked, but apparently if you did it wrong, it blew up. Like if you got this not shut off, and I know it wasn't an oxyacetylene because I'm aware of how that happens. It was some kind of a welder that if you got the mixture wrong, it wasn't a small blow up, it was blow the building up, blow up. And he was 6 years old and out there welding stuff up, just having a good time.
Is he like on a farm setting or?
Yeah. I mean, right where we are, he's, aside from that first 8 years, he grew up like 3 miles away from here.
Oh, wow.
To the northeast, kind of out between Andover and Benton.
Cool.
So yeah. And he worked, the earliest story that I remember other than that he could weld at 6 years old, because I just couldn't believe that when I heard, when he told me, I believed him, but it just sounded crazy, was I almost didn't get here. My mom almost didn't get here. My grandpa lived through something that was kind of a near miss when he was a kid. He actually rolled a tractor over on himself. On the old metal tractors, they'd have you have the seat, and then you have the metal bar that kind of comes up, and then they got the little, oblong piece of metal that you're supposed to rest your back on. Well, apparently this tractor, that oblong piece was gone. So it was just like a raw piece of like 6-inch flat bar. And when he rolled it, that drove through his leg, like his upper thigh. I don't know exactly how it missed like the femoral artery. It was up through his, like almost through, like he could feel under his leg and he could feel the metal through the skin.
Oh shit.
And, he's out there, a mile from home. And, I remember him telling me the story because his brothers were a bit younger, and I don't remember which brother or anything, but he's trying to like get him to grab like a tree limb and try to leverage it off of him. I don't know how they ended up getting him there, but he could kind of feel himself kind of slipping once they got it off of him and got him in the car. And he explained that he told his mom, Don't let me fall asleep on the way to the hospital because I don't think I'm going to wake up if I do go to sleep.
How old was he when that happened? Do you remember?
14.
Oh, wow.
Running heavy farm equipment at 14 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe some parts of our state, some parts of our country, but you don't really hear that. It's particularly unsupervised.
Oh, yeah.
So pretty cool stuff. Then, like I said, he went to the military and he talked about stories in Mississippi. I don't know where he was in basic or anything like that, but I know he served in Biloxi, Mississippi, and up around Syracuse, New York. And that's actually where he met my grandma. My grandma was apparently a handful. She was a handful when I knew her. Apparently it was not a new thing because the way they met was she actually threw a milkshake through the window of his car. I don't know. Like, I don't think she even knew whose car it was. I think they were at the races or something. And the guy that she wanted to see win didn't win. And she chucked the milkshake into grandpa's car and he kind of hollered at her. And, that was how my grandparents came to meet.
I'm guessing it was a vanilla milkshake.
I'm not sure what flavor the milkshake was, but my grandma was that kind of person. They'd tell me stories that they'd be walking down the street and there'd be some pretty girl walking in front of them. And my grandpa was like, not a flirty guy. That just wasn't his deal. He was very much focused on who he was with. But that pretty girl, my grandma would whistle. And then when the girl turned around, she'd slap my grandpa like he was the one that did it. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely kept him on his toes.
Ornery.
Yeah. Yeah. So they moved back to Kansas and had my uncle Vance and my mom Lucy. And, they grew up together. Something I wanted to kind of discuss because one of the ways we try to grow is as parents. And I have not ever in my life seen a father and son that were closer. Like every day, best friends, same hobbies, same opinions, like doing the same things, building cars, welding, doing all kinds of anything. Just, he spent his time with his family.
That's very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, could you imagine going everywhere with your dad and, learning how to build motorcycles, how to race motorcycles, how to ride them, how to build cars, race cars. I mean, they were not specific. They would build and drive and race and all that stuff.
That's so cool, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And, something I was going to talk about with my grandpa, he was tough. Like, he was not like a rough guy. Like, he didn't speak roughly. It just wasn't his thing. But, he rolled a tractor on himself. And then in the military, I wish for the life of me, I could remember the number. He did some insane amount of sit-ups because that was like a huge part of the military training, he did some like continuing to train himself and he got to where he could lift quite a bit. And he did something like 1,000 sit-ups in a row or something. And then he spent a month in the infirmary because like whatever, it caused an infection like under his tailbone from just going on that area over and over, repetitive motion. And they had to like cut a big old chunk out and like pack it full of cloth and stuff like that and then pull it out every day. It had to be like excruciating. But yeah, that's kind of the young man that was going to become my grandpa. I can't imagine. I don't know that I can do 100 sit-ups in a row, let alone whatever 1,000 or whatever he was doing. It was like a very unattainable number. But my grandpa, like I said, he got into a lot of stuff and, he was into fixing cars, machining. He could build we built a radio when I was a kid. Like what, I don't know, even know, like he was just kind of walking me through it cause I was so little, but like a shortwave radio where you could pick up radio stations. Like he knew how to do all that kind of stuff, welding, fabricating, machining. He tried to teach me machining and I didn't quite have the patience for that. But, and Then he started a business, and it was called the Works Automotive. It was not that far from here either. It's out on a country road, and it was just an auto shop. And one of his favorite stories to tell me when I was a kid was, so I guess, I know the building. Like the building's still there. Like it's still, his best friend still owns the actual physical shop, even though it's not open for business. And to the north of this building is like a large section of field. And the way when Grandpa tells the story is I had wandered out in the field and I was like 3, 4, and was just kind of wandering around playing in the dirt or whatever 3-year-old kids did before cell phones. And he goes to walk out there and he sees the worst thing you could possibly see. He sees this pack of dogs running at me. And he realizes he's too far away from me to get to me. He's too far away from a firearm to get the firearm and be effective. We had this dog, and I can vaguely remember this dog in my mind. I believe it was some kind of golden retriever. I remember its name was Wup, and I liked Wup. Wup was a cool dog. And out of nowhere, Wup just takes off. And there's like 7 or 8 or 9 of these dogs coming at me. And that dog proceeded to fight all these dogs, fight all of them, and gave my grandpa, he just took off running and got to me, scooped me up, and the fight just kept moving. And, it might be part of the reason why I value dogs so much. They found several, like, I think there was 2 corpses they didn't find, but they found Wups too. So that dog put its life down, to save a little kid. That little kid happened to be me. My grandpa was always a big animal lover. He never even particularly liked hunting. He understood how it worked, and he understood that somebody had to kill the cow he was eating. He just never really chose to do it himself. Big animal lover, very kind about that kind of stuff. The only time I ever saw him kill animals was when they'd have a pet that was, it was time. Rather than go to the vet and have it shot, he would just handle it himself. And he did that my whole life, even until I was an adult. He'd just do it. And he said, yeah, I'd rather you didn't have to. He said, I don't want to, but I want you to less. So
those wild packs of dogs out in the country are no joke.
Right. Well, it sounds like
It's
a fantastic story.
It's a real thing. I mean, when we lived down at the lake, there was it's still an issue today. And I mean, there's this giant pack of wild dogs, and they just cause destruction everywhere they go. And, it's been quite a controversial deal down there of how to handle it.
Right.
Yeah, even just here, my wife grew up not too far from here and out in the country, and they just would be cruising out there, 5 of them, 10 of them, 15 of them, just however, just sparsed out.
Right. It's so far removed from what we think of our pets and stuff like that. These animals that sleep in our rooms and totally could, but don't hurt us, and then you got the same exact animal out there in a different situation, and they're out just causing chaos. But, so my grandpa was also, he was into motocross, and if I'm understanding, like, cause I didn't ask him like what year everything happened, but like, I'm talking, I think he was in his 30s and 40s riding motocross, like at the local motocross place. And he had some, they did some races, like enduro races. And then there were some like others, and I couldn't tell you what they were, but people can look them up. They were called like, hare scrambles and hare and hound races. And I don't know what that actually means. I think he may have described it at some point, but I didn't really get it. I think part of it was on like a motocross track, and then part of it would be out across a field and around the, around the creek. And so it was a little mixture of both maybe. But yeah, he did that. And, the injury that actually ended up really affecting the rest of his life came out on the motocross track because he went to go through one of those hairpins, and you watch motocross, they put their foot down and just stomp the throttle and it kicks the butt into the bike around. Well, when that happened, his foot stayed stuck. So his foot was spun around like almost backwards. And, he gets off and gets some help and, straightening his leg back out. And, we decided to walk it off for a couple days. Like when I say, a couple days, it was swollen so bad he couldn't get his jeans on. That's what it told him. He had to go to the hospital and have it looked at, and that injury is what slowed him down and slowed him down over the years to the point that it, caused him to have to retire and stuff. But that's like a pretty full life. And then going to get his pilot's license. I didn't even write that down in my notes. Just, reading the obituary, he was, probably in his mid 50s when he started flying. Just decided, it's something he's always wanted to do. And he just started putting his money where his mouth was and learning how to fly.
Just as a hobby?
Yeah. Yeah. I think all he ever did was his private pilot's license. Cause, being a pilot is kind of a rich man's game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure there's ways to do it otherwise, but just as a hobby, it's definitely a rich man's game. And yeah,
I feel like even just owning a plane.
Right. No, he didn't own one.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get you.
Yeah. Yeah. He definitely rented it.
That's awesome though.
Yeah. I mean, I did grow up. There's a little airport, green buildings out off of 143rd and like 37th Street.
Mm-hmm.
And in there, they have these things called ultralights. And it's literally like a hang glider with a 350 strapped to it with a propeller coming off the back. And, growing up, like he'd spend his Saturdays out there just watching and, checking it out. And, every once in a while they'd be like, hey, does that kid want to come up? And they'd fly. I think they fly at like 300 feet. It's something incredibly low to where if something goes wrong, you better figure it out just now.
Did you ever go flying with him?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Did you ever fly on one of those ultralights?
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's what I was saying is like they'd take me up. I think I've probably been up, 4 or 5 times. And I don't know, being a kid, I didn't have a real frame of reference. I don't think we went very farther. The speedometer I do remember was a tube that looked like a rain gauge with a hole in the front side of it. And that's told you how fast you were going. And I remember there's a gentleman that let me actually take the stick over, and I kept like kind of listing to one side that looked straight to me. But yeah, I mean, headsets and the whole deal, you can't really hear anything up there, but yeah, I got to be in one of the ultralights a couple times.
That's super cool, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I look back and it's like, wow, I did get to do a lot of really cool stuff. Between that and, my grandpa built a 1923 T-Bucket Roadster that was pretty awesome.
Oh, yeah.
And so they'd spend some time going out to like car shows and stuff like that. And I had no idea that that's not an easy social circle to really get into. Guys that can build their own really nice cars, and I was being introduced to all the guys that were doing it. And now I didn't know, I'm 5, 6 years old and hey, these are cool cars. And I like riding in grandpa's old car cause it goes fast. I didn't know, but super cool going to like all the small towns, Douglas days and the fall festivals and checking out the car shows. It was kind of a really cool experience as a kid. Really enjoyed those.
I love taking my kids to car shows, man. It's fun, especially the small town ones. They're so cool.
So like what catches your kids' eyes in the car shows?
Flashy paint.
Yeah.
Definitely with them being young, Madeline's not like super into cars. Kyson, man, he's just anything that just looks cool, and
big exhaust coming out the hood.
Oh yeah, just anything that just looks like something he don't see every day. And then as soon as they fire up the loud engines and stuff, he's kind of just like apprehensive about it. Super loud, but yeah, it's just fun going out and looking at the cool stuff, walking around, checking it out. I mean, I've always loved car shows since I was a little kid.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But so I always loved my grandparents. They'd take me and, I actually, when I was born, my grandparents went through a several years separation. And so when I was born, it was this strange time where like my mom and I lived with my grandma in an apartment, and grandpa lived like 3 blocks away in his house with my uncle. You know, both my mom and my uncle were adults. And, you know, when her and grandpa moved back in together, that was cool. I'd go out and see him all the time. But, you know, the real influence, I mean, that did influence me, but the more meaningful, I suppose, was I was, you know, we've talked before, I was a troubled kid. And when I needed to get away from my parents and needed to do something different, my grandpa was that guy. I mean, it was one phone call. He didn't ask to talk to my parents. He just said, yeah, I'm on my way. And I was 16, maybe 17. And he came and got me. And that's where I lived for the next few years, and proceeded to put him through hell, you know, not on purpose. Definitely didn't know what was in front of me. But you know, my grandpa was that person. The other story he always liked to tell was that when I was born, you know, they hand the baby to the mom, and then where does the baby go? I mean, you know, I wasn't really born with a dad so much. So I went to my grandpa, and he tells the story, and he told me the reason why he's telling me was to let me know I was covered. And he just said, you know, if nobody else will take care of you, I will. And he never for a moment, not in any way, did he ever fail that. He was always there. I mean, if there was a separation, it was because I was young and crazy and doing stupid stuff. You know, I always had a place to go. I always had a home. I could always go out to the farm, and, you know, it was, you know, it had to be hard for them, you know, because there was mornings they'd wake up and I'd just be asleep out on a hammock. They didn't, you know, I've been gone for weeks, and I'd just be, I'm sure I looked like 9 miles of bad road, you know, and I had to be, you know, difficult. Somebody they put that much love and care into, somebody they love that much, and just watch them just destroy that, you know, destroy themselves the way I was, you know, it was something I really learned about later on as I tried to get sober. You know, I thought when I was out there doing that, it was hurting nobody but me, but just, you know, it's absolutely false.
When did you start to see that? Like you talk about, you just don't know what you don't know. When did you start to see the value in that relationship?
You know, I probably started to, you know, I always loved my grandparents. Like there was at no point that I was like, didn't like them. But as far as the value of just having that solid of people behind me, probably towards the end of my addiction, you know, when it starts to weigh on you, the things you're doing start to really kind of weigh on you, and you're feeling helpless and hopeless, and I should probably really stop. And then you go do it again. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's probably the time when it really started to kind of sink in, you know, and ever since that time, you know, so for about the last 20 years, I can look back at periods and things my grandpa did and things my grandpa said. And it's like, man, if I would have paid more attention, I'd have learned this earlier. You know, it was right there in front of me. You know, some of those things, were simple. My grandpa was definitely subject to that whole concept of hangry, you know, hungry and angry. Mm-hmm. But he wasn't a real selfish guy, and he wasn't a whiner. So I would notice, like living there, that my grandpa would come home from work, and he would try not to really interact with anybody for about 10 minutes. And then he'd be home, like all the way, you know, mentally home. But if supper wasn't quite there yet, he'd still kind of be quiet. And I figured out with time watching him that he'd get a little frustrated and just, you know, hungry, in pain, whatever, you tend to get grumpy. And so instead of lashing out and just saying, well, I'm hungry, that's why I'm being a dick, he would just say less so that he didn't start treating people poorly, you know, and have something that he had to make right later. You know, that was, you know, it's kind of a constitution thing. It's kind of a humble thing. Like, hey, whatever I'm going through is not so important. I get to treat everybody around me like a jerk, you know, and that's something I did learn from him. I didn't employ it right away, but I think my grandpa just being quiet while dinner was finishing up or while we went to got dinner probably saved him a lot of fights over the years.
That's some strong self-awareness too.
Right. Right. Just knowing to kind of clamp down,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something that you can learn good things and bad things from people. And I learned a lot of good from my grandpa. And that's one, especially when I compare it to, the things I see, I see people just any reason. And I've done it, and I've observed myself doing it. And I've observed how doing it properly and just being quiet and I'm not that important, because I've seen people that, oh, well, it's my birthday this month. I get to be an asshole for the whole month. I mean, basically that concept, or my stomach hurts, or I'm injured. I'm just going to be a jerk. Or, I had a loved one die. I'm going to be a complete jerk for the next however long. And I'm going to use this as a complete excuse, just not really the way my grandpa was. And, when I figured that out and figured out why and everything, it really did click home why he was so well respected. So we absolutely have no fly zones, and I'm not trying to, get into anything. My grandpa was, just to kind of give you the point of reference, why he did what he did, some of the things, and things I learned later, definitely my grandpa was definitely close with God. That was definitely a life mission for him. And one of the things he would always talk about was laying up treasures in heaven. Like the money that he had today didn't really matter to him. It was living to try to be a better person, because my grandpa would, he knew how to fix about everything, and he would just do it over and over again. And I saw, he never complained. I saw, people not paying him enough, people not having any money. And he could be an outlet for that kind of stuff a lot of the time. And he never made all that money. He made, I know he made at least a couple people very wealthy that he worked for. And he never really complained about that. He just happily went to work and enjoyed the work he did, enjoyed the craftsmanship, enjoyed creating things. And, he had a happy life and a happy family, and that was balance for him. It wasn't the $1 million. And while $1 million would be nice, I do see what he got for that, for his time, for the money he didn't get. I do see what he got for that, because everybody liked Grandpa. Everybody respected him. He actually, at the company he worked for a smaller shop, and for something incredible like 5 or 10 years, there was a handful of guys that would show up an hour before work to sit and have Bible study my grandpa led. And he didn't, hey, you should come to my Bible study. Like, they asked him to do it, and then continued to come for years and years and years on end. And I was, at 18 years old, I started working with him. And even I was like, I think I'm going to sleep in the truck the extra hour, but just guys wanting to learn from him. And, whatever religion people are, whatever, that's not, my grandpa was having a, personal growth podcast before work every day for years. He was definitely trying to help people and help people grow and whatever, because he was asked to, doing the thing in front of him.
I see value in that. It just kind of hit me right now, just the whole concept of just, he was happy. He wasn't out there trying to become this rich millionaire. He wasn't, but he was happy. Like, I think that's a foreign concept to people today. I've caught myself in that same trap of, I'm stressing out. I need to make more money. I'm doing something wrong. And then all that other stuff goes out the window. Family, happiness. It just all goes out the window for me. And I'm like, I'm realizing it right now. Like, I'm in a place today where I might not ever make any more money than what I make right now today. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But it couldn't be further from my mind, because I enjoy what I do. I'm happy. I'm pouring into my cup at home with my family, and I'm working on myself, and just like life is really good today. So it feels good to hear that, you tell like how that was kind of your grandpa's same principle too, of just whatever magic combination he figured out. Like he was just a happy guy and was pouring in other people's cups, and just, it didn't bother him at all. Like he was just happy. And I don't know if that makes sense, but I'd like to think I'm trying to work towards that too. And I feel like I'm much closer now than I've ever been at seeing that and being self-aware of that. It's pretty good to hear that.
Yeah. I mean, I think I still struggle with it some, because I want the nicer, bigger, badder, more expensive, whatever of the week, and I mean, certainly having the internet to show me all the things I don't have now definitely helps, helps drive that force. But just the amount of peace and happiness, and he never would shy away from, telling me stories and teaching me little lessons. I remember one of the ones, because he was a police officer, reserve officer. And I'll tell this little story. And like I said, I may mess up some details, but I got the idea. It was somewhere here in Butler County. They were going to have a 4th of July, like fireworks show, and the city or whoever was trying to light off like the big fireworks. And they needed this area of the park cleared out so that it wouldn't be like a fire issue. And so they went and told this guy he needed to move, and the guy wouldn't move. His campsite was set up and whatever. And I get the feeling like this was like mid 70s. And so they called, the reserve officers, and, stuff like holidays. That's when those guys would work the most, cause they needed the extra help. And they called my grandpa over to get this guy to move. And grandpa rolls up and sees a few things, around, and he starts asking the guy, about his service. He saw some military kind of things or something. And, he just sit there and talked to the guy for a while, and never even mentioned moving. Just talked to him, asked him about stuff, shot the breeze with him for 10 minutes. And the guy looked at me and goes, hell, I'll move. I just wish people would treat me with some respect. The guy had been over there. He'd been in it. He lived there. He lived out at the campsite. That's where he chose, he was going through it. And just somebody going out there and being respectful to him. Grandpa didn't even have to ask him. Yeah, the guy knew why he was there. Grandpa didn't even have to ask him. He just treated the guy with a little humanity, a little bit of respect, and got what he didn't even have to ask for yet.
It's almost like a quality of his that just came naturally, huh? At that time in his life. Just treating people like people.
I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if it was natural. To say it was just natural, like, of course, that's what it looked like my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
But I lived with the guy. I know he got cranky when he was hungry. I know he hated commercials. I know he had some things that bugged him. So to say it just came naturally almost feels like it would take away from him if he worked for it. It's like accusing a guy of being on steroids that's just out there busting his butt to try to grow. No, I don't think that just comes naturally. Maybe it comes easier, one person or another, but I think that's something he had to have developed.
It probably ties into like his self-awareness too. And just that, I mean, for me, has been something that definitely has to be developed.
Right.
But it sounds like he had like a pretty good set of morals and virtues that he would follow. I don't know if virtues is the right word, but just a good, strong set of morals, like a man of integrity.
Right.
And, man, he just sounds like a hell of a guy.
Right. Another thing that would make me think he kind of probably had to work towards it was, I obviously never met great grandpa, but the stories I've heard, like people in their 80s, I know one of my grandpa's classmates to this day. She still talks about how scary his dad was. Guy's been gone for 60 something years, and she still, you can see, like, when she talks about it, it's like there's a physical reaction. I don't think he was a very big guy, but apparently there was a level of aggression and violence there that was pretty substantial. So to say that my grandpa like was just raised right or something, no, I think he had to earn some of that.
Like a break the cycle kind of thing.
It very much seems that way. Even grandpa didn't talk that much about that. You know, I think those might have been painful to him.
That's an unfortunate, not an unfortunate, that's part of growing up too. I think sometimes we come to see not everybody's life maybe looks this way, but some people's lives, you know, you grow up in a setting and it's just nothing but qualities and attributes that you don't want to be anything like as you grow older and then become a parent or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And,
I think that's like everywhere though, right? Like think of every kid.
yeah.
Every time they fought with their parents, I'm never going to treat my children like this.
Right. Yeah. Now I got a bunch of spoiled ass kids that get everything they want. Daddy didn't buy me that toy.
Right. Right. You know, and I mean, he did have a good example as far as what it seems like, you know, because I did get to meet his mom and she was like the quiet, nice little old lady and just super sweet. Like I can't think of a person to compare her to. She was just that sweet. Like there's no TV character. I mean, June Cleaver just ain't got nothing on my great grandma. She was just such a nice lady. So, you know, it maybe was, I can choose this or I can choose that, you know, I don't know. He wasn't a very judgmental guy. You know, I learned a lot about humility. Like one of the things that, I didn't realize it until somebody else did it. Actually, my father-in-law that passed, they're the two men that they would say the kindest things to other men. I mean, not that they were unkind to women, but that's normal. That's average. That's just part of the deal.
Being kind to women.
Right.
Right.
But to look at another man and compliment, man, you did that really, really well. Or, wow, you're really, really smart. Or whatever the compliment is. My grandpa built me up so much that, you know, when I got down to the deep depths, like it seemed, the hole probably seemed deeper because grandpa had the hill built up. You know, it was like, dang, I was supposed to be that. And now I'm, you know, in this hole. You know, but to the day he died, he never stopped. He just always, man, I'm so proud of what you're doing. I'm so proud of what you're doing. You know, I don't know. I feel like the grieving process is hard. It's been a week. I don't know. I don't really regret a lot of my past, but I think the most painful moment I ever had with my grandfather was, it took me a while to figure out my sobriety and my steps and, you know, start to actually do the work. And I had a couple years sober when I actually started doing the work, a couple years not using. And, one of the hardest memories I have was making amends to my grandparents, because I don't know, they didn't want to understand. And I don't mean that in like they were judgmental. I mean, we were sitting down one day and I said, you know, I'd like to talk about those years when I was real messed up. And they kind of both got a guarded look and, oh, okay. I said, well, there's something I got to do, you know, and I explained making amends and I don't know how I can make it right. And, sorry. All my grandpa asked me for was to never talk about it again, because it was in the past. And he said it hurts to talk about, and I don't care to ever talk about it again, but I love you, buddy.
Man, that's tough.
Yeah. You always think, you know, you get into the AA or whatever, you get into making amends. You always figure the hard amends are going to be the people that tell you to, you know, go away. I don't want to see you. That's the amends I want. Now that was that was the unexpectedly hard amends. I kind of figured with my grandparents, it was going to be like, well, no harm, no foul, some living amends, that I just don't do it anymore. And, not only don't do it anymore, but, I got to see the pain. I got to see that a little bit, and it stuck with me.
That's, for what it's worth. I mean, that's probably a good thing that stuck with you like that. It was an impactful moment for you that you probably needed.
Yeah.
Just to feel the weight of how it really did affect them. Because like you said earlier, man, when we're out there, like, we think we're just hurting ourselves, and it's
Right.
couldn't be further from the truth.
Right.
And usually sometimes the amends go like, man, you're just doing great. I'm proud of you. Just keep on doing what you're doing and all is right. And then like, yeah, so that had to have been very hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I mean,
How old were you when that happened?
well, so I was 3 or 4 years sober. So I was probably 26, 27.
Mm-hmm.
It's been 10 or 15 years ago now.
And did you guys ever revisit it again?
No.
You just stuck to what they asked for.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. There was times I wanted to, but, I need to make myself feel better.
Mm-hmm.
No,
That's not how it works.
no, I don't get to drag them through the bad experience one more time to make myself feel better.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that was made clear to me, by people that were teaching me how to stay sober, that, yeah, guess what? It's the cost of doing the business you did.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't get to choose those things.
Right. But yeah, the way Grandpa would always just, hey man, that was really smart. Hey, that was, a great job. Everything was pretty positive. I mean, he would correct me if I made mistakes. I think, I recall I grew up, in the spanking environment, and Grandpa wasn't real abused. As a matter of fact, I remember getting spanked twice, and it was probably, he was a little out of stroke, probably not trying, not trying to be that guy.
Just going through the motion.
Yeah. But it woke me up. I still know what I did wrong.
Mm.
I think I was 5 on one and probably 12 on the other. And, I never repeated those behaviors because it only happened twice ever.
Mm. Just like how you describe him as just building up other men around him. I mean, that's one of my favorite qualities about you as a person, is you really do carry that quality of like, you like to see the men around you grow and do better. And more times than not, I see you say things or do things, whether even you realize you're doing it or not, but you can either be the guy that's moving the needle backwards or forward with those around you, building people up and helping people grow. And I mean, that's a quality that I feel like you have that's strong with you, that I don't know how strong that quality is with me. And it's something that I look up to when I look up at how, in the many ways that I look up to you as a friend. That's one of the strong ones that stands out to me, that's something that you genuinely care about the guys around you growing. And I mean, like, I want to be more like that too. And I can't honestly say that I'm like that today. I am a little bit. I'm working on it, like in small doses, and, helping people grow and get better in small doses, and I try not to compare, but I feel like maybe that's something you obviously like learn from your grandpa just along the way. Like those things you subconsciously learn. You see other people do, and it just kind of gets planted in your brain at a young age. And it's just like, this is part of my operating procedure.
Right.
I'm not going to just tear everybody, because we all know guys like that it is hard. You pointed it out. Like with women, yeah, we're all kind of pretty naturally like kind to women, but like as guys, like, we tear each other down, out there in the world, in the wild, guys aren't generally building each other up. It's just not a common thread that I've seen.
Right. Right. And I've given it a lot of thought, and I don't know. I don't know why, because, been in the AA program for all these years. And so I've tried to help in that way and stuff, just kind of, hey, it's the next thing. It's the thing you're supposed to do. But it's taken to the last couple of years for me to realize that there was, a couple of really impactful people, and, hey, Joe, you're good at this. Hey, Joe, you need to do this. Hey, you can do this, and I guess what I needed in my life was put in my life, because it certainly, to me, kind of points out my weaknesses when I think about quitting. Oh man, maybe I just need to go back to work, for a company or something. And it's like, man, how did these other guys that built companies and done this and had nobody telling them that? How much easier is it for me because I had somebody saying, oh yeah, you can do it for sure. You got it. And how many times has that been the deciding factor between success, continuing at least, and failure and quitting and giving up on whatever shot I was taking?
I think we can get surrounded by people. I've heard somebody on a podcast or something recently talking about this. I'm drawing a blank on what it was, but when you're in, like, as an example, if you're in just this lower class environment and you're trying to break away from that and, like, for example, start a business or something along those lines, and you'll find yourself, and I've experienced this myself, not with starting a business, but just what I'm getting to, you'll start to find that the people around you will fill you with doubt, will tell you why you shouldn't do that thing, why you shouldn't chase that dream, why it's going to fail. And it's something about when somebody breaks away from the pack or is trying to, it makes everybody around them, it brings their insecurities to the surface of, well, if he doesn't do it and doesn't fail, then I don't have to feel some type of way about why I never tried or why I just stayed comfortable forever. And I think that's part of that. And you were used to, hearing the positives and the uplifting stuff, and just, I almost wonder if it's easier for you to drown out I don't even know if you experience what I'm talking about, but just, you does that make sense? You guys ever
like you're talking about, like, the idea of, like, crabs in a pot, right? There's a bunch of crabs in a pot trying to crawl out before they all get boiled. But then as one's climbing up, the other one grabs him to pull himself up, and they both pull themselves down.
Right.
Right. And I think what it comes from is if I'm seeing that Joe tells me, hey, I'm going to start doing this. I'm like, well, probably shouldn't do that. That's a bad idea because of this. But, like, people do that because that's their excuse. So if Joe does it and it works,
now they don't have
now
an
I don't have my
anymore.
excuse. Yeah.
It's some weird human thing.
Yeah, I think sometimes it comes out of a place of worrying, or, a place of love almost, where it's like, that's risky. You're doing that. That's kind of risky. You probably shouldn't do it, even though there's probably also some jealousy or something else underlying there. But I think there's, like, a part where that comes out of, like, a worry for that person of, like, I'm insecure. I'm scared to do that thing. I don't want you to do that thing. And, like, so they're pushing their insecurities onto you. Exactly. But at the same time, also, it's like, well, if you achieve that, then I don't have an excuse, and I don't like that either.
Right.
So it's like a multifaceted.
It's almost like they
issue.
do it subconsciously.
Yeah. I don't think anybody does that on purpose when they do that. I think it's always them not realizing they're doing it.
And so part of what this person was talking about was, like, you have to not listen to that stuff. Like, you have to focus on your list of goals and where you want your life to go, and focus on that. Quit focusing on the peanut gallery, if you will, because it will trick you. It will talk you out of taking risk or taking the leap or whatever it is. We didn't get way off track with that, did we?
No, not at all.
Okay.
And like you were saying, maybe, don't short me. Yeah, I've experienced that. And I can't tell you, like, oh, it was this person at this time, but I've experienced that to the point that it's between my ears all the time.
Right.
No, you can't. No, you can't. But I'm just going to go tomorrow and do it.
Yeah. And that's kind of what this guy was saying, was, like, the more you listen to it, the more it lives rent free in your head. And pretty soon it's going to take over the operating system, and you're going to revert back to, like, comfort, just what you're used to.
Right. Right. And I think that's a fight. I must have heard it. Like I said, it's so ingrained in me, despite my grandfathers, and my grandmother too. They both just acted like I was going to be the next president. But then I've heard enough of the other stuff that, that's on repeat, and it's nonstop. And, it gets to the point where, like people talk about, you hear motivational speakers talk about a why.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Same.
I don't know. I know I want to help people, and I'm not just highlighting because you were talking about something a minute ago. I know that feeling that we've talked about before of actually being able to help somebody. That was so addicting that I know that's a why. That is one that's there. I know it is. And I know that being more successful in business, yeah, okay, nicer house or, nicer this or nicer that, whatever. But if I have that success financially, I feel like I have emotional success. I have growth to make,
Right.
but I've achieved a level of success with a happy marriage. Fortunately, I've had healthy kids, but I've got good relationships. Sure, there's things I'd do different, but I feel like I've got success in a lot of areas, but financial is not one of them, not particularly. And I feel like that's part of what what drives me is for the financial success is so I can turn around and, hey, I have another skill set that I can show somebody, show the next person. Because I mean, in life, I don't know. I think I'm only about, I'm only worth what I'm worth to other people, and whether you put that in a dollar amount, emotional, I mean, what are you actually worth?
Mm.
You're worth what you can do for others. That's really what your worth is, whether that's $1 billion you can hand out or hand to your kids or do what you do with that, or whether it's a kind word or the ability to, like our friend Junior, the ability to feed people, and cook well or whatever I feel like that is my value is what can I do for others?
Mm.
Because at the end of the day, I mean, the stuff that I do for myself is just unsatisfying. Usually, I get haircuts pretty regularly, and that's for me. And that is pretty satisfying. Other than that, man, the times when I do what Joe wants to do, the times when I sit around and eat the bowl of ice cream, those are the things I do for me. And there's no reward at the end of them. They are their own reward, and it's pretty short lived. I don't know, get off my soapbox.
You're good, dude. It's good stuff.
Is there ever I don't mean in like a monetary or like physical way, but is there ever a time that you can think of that you helped your grandpa?
I mean, a lot of physical labor,
Yeah.
but
I mean, did you guys ever have a conversation where he came to you like, man, Joe, I don't know what to do right now. I don't know what to think. I don't know what to feel. That's okay if not. I'm just curious.
There was times that he used me like as a sounding board when he would tell me about stuff that was going on. But I don't know that I ever gave advice, mine was more operational, technical, something he didn't, on a cell phone that he didn't know how to do. Those are the helps that I had for him. And then just learning to listen, he could listen very well. And not always, advice is mostly bullshit.
Mm.
I guess there was, times that he would ask me about addiction, and he'd approach it because we had another family member that suffers addiction problems. And, hell with it. You get raw, right? It was my dad, his son-in-law. And I don't understand this. Because my grandpa smoked cigarettes for like a year and then just one day decided not to. My grandpa could have a beer once every 6 months or one every night for a week and then forget about him for 6 months. I don't know. That was not part of him. And so he didn't understand it. And how does this drive this person to this point? And how does this do this? And, he wanted to understand the workings of an alcoholic and drug addict brain. And what made you keep going? What made it so important? And, he would ask me that stuff. And I don't know if I actually taught him anything or just scared him with the inside of what goes on my brain, but I'd share honestly with him, which is something that, like we learned about the program, you share your alcoholic and drug addict stories, at least to start with other alcoholics and drug addicts. Cause you don't, it's on a different level to go talk to a bunch of normal people about it, but I always had that trust in my grandpa that I could share freely with him, so I think that's probably what I ever taught him was what goes on in people's brains when they're acting like that.
Do you have a, try to explain this. I don't know if you'll get my point. In memory that was probably seems insignificant, but you remember it very well. But like to him, he'd be like, why do you remember that? What is there like, is there something that you're like, when you think back about like, let me think of an old memory of grandpa and it's the first one that pops up.
Got it.
What is it?
It's, I couldn't tell you my exact age, 3 or 4 years old. Grandpa still lives in the house while mom and I live with grandma in the apartment, a few blocks away. And I remember specifically because grandpa was definitely part of the life. Like he just like dads don't babysit their kids. You take care of your kids. Grandpa, had me over there a lot, whenever I wanted to go over, and I would be in his house and I'd stay the night, and he would, I remember his bed was like super tall, like tall as this table tall. Like only time I ever seen him in a bed shorter than that was when he was in the hospital toward the end of his life. I don't know why he always had really tall beds, and I never thought to ask.
Old people thing.
Is it?
Yeah. My experience. Yeah.
Okay. And I remember specifically exactly what the bed looked like. It's just a metal frame. I remember the frame was painted blue. Don't know why. I remember the audio tape player, what it looked like, because there was a weird record button in the middle of the play button that I always wanted to play with, and it never would move. I don't know. That sticks out in my mind, and he would put this tape on, and I don't remember half the songs, but I do remember that old song, Wooly Wooly.
Okay.
And then Charlie Brown, and then Yakety Yak. And it was time to go to sleep after that song. Like he would play the whole side of the tape, and I remembered that those were the last 3 songs every time. And I don't know why, as a little kid, I didn't understand what the songs were even about, but I liked the song Yakety Yak when I was a little kid, and they went and took me to go see the Coasters and the Benders. One of them played Charlie Brown and one of them played Yakety Yak. And that was the first concert I ever saw. But I remember going to bed, bedtime with grandpa, and he'd toss me up in the bed and put the tape on. And I knew when Yakety Yak was over, it was okay to go to sleep.
So we just play Yakety Yak and Joe's out.
Probably. Yeah. It was that was a very, distinct memory.
That's exactly what I was asking for. Yep.
Yeah. Also, that's who taught me to ride a motorcycle.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of figured that, but I wasn't 100% sure.
Also, who taught me how to drive a car.
Mm-hmm.
He taught me driving from the time I was like 8 and was too short to reach the pedals. So he would actually just put me on his lap to steer and be out on the dirt roads, and he'd just run the gas pedal, and we'd just cruise down the dirt roads. And, on the way home, I actually do remember one night, it's dark, full dark, but I could see fine. We were going 25 miles an hour. Probably we weren't going very fast. And I see these 2 these 2 bright dots in the middle of the road coming. I'm like, hey, grandpa. Hey, grandpa. Hey, grandpa. He's like, what? There's eyes in the road or something. And he actually was snoozing. He knew the way home so well that I was just driving along, and there's a cow in the road.
Oh, no.
And he's like, oh, well, I probably should stay awake. And he just slowed down, and I steered around the cow, and away we went.
Man, country life.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Taught me how to ride, bought me a go-kart when I was a kid, and, it wasn't okay to just ride the go-kart. Like it would have been, but he's like, hey, you seem like you're getting pretty comfortable there. You want me to show you how to do, go around that corner faster? You want me to show you how, you could actually go up this little hill here, and like started showing me some more cool stuff. Like, hey, this will do this too. All the little things that, I'm a little kid. I don't know what it's going to do if I go up that hill. I might just get stuck or die, or I don't know. I'm a little kid.
We can pull the turbo off this tractor. Going on this thing.
Right.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
What motorcycle did he teach you to ride on?
It was a dirt bike, Honda 200R. And, it's a family trait. We grow later on in high school. Like my grandpa went into his senior year in high school, the shortest guy in the school, and came out not the shortest guy in the school anymore. Grew like substantially in, that 1 year. And I was the same way. And I was probably 13 or 14. And he would sit on the back of the dirt bike and, taught me how to ride. And he explained to me how to stop, pulling in the clutch. But he had to also add in the step that when you come to the stop, you need to be next to that hay bale so you can actually put your foot down.
Were you ever not next to that hay bale?
Man, I did pretty good with the hay bale, and so I wasn't there all the time. I didn't live there full time, but Grandpa had actually got me in first gear and got me where I'd shift up to second gear. And, he's like, hey, before you shift into second, and hops off the bike, just took a running, we were going 10 miles an hour. He just took a couple running steps and I'm off and going. So I go to tell my Uncle Vance that I know how to ride the motorcycle at Thanksgiving. I said, I just can't start it. I need a hay bale. He's like, oh, okay. And he knew the drill. Well, I thought I was more advanced than I actually was. And I was telling him I was that advanced. And so he, got it started for me, got me up on the hay bale. I don't remember what, I actually think I just hit like a big rock, but there was a bunch of cars parked and I go, and I'm missing the cars. And then all of a sudden, bam, right in the side of my parents' car, wrecked the bike right into the side of my parents' car. And they come out and Grandpa's like, hey, you might need to, not do it on your own quite yet. Okay. I wasn't lacking confidence that day.
I thought you were going to say you just whiskey throttled it right out of first gear and just
looped it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's where I thought you were going with it.
No, he'd hand me motocross magazines. I mean, I learned how to ride through water and all kinds of cool stuff. And not like I'm by no means like a racer or whatever, but that was when I moved out with my grandparents being homeschooled. That was actually PE.
Mm-hmm.
Grandma would be like, go out and get on the dirt bike and ride hard.
We need to
bring that back.
Yeah, we need to go to one of those dirt bike tracks that you rent some bikes.
Yeah,
go see how fast Joe is. I bet he just smash everybody.
No, not even kind of, bro. Like I never raced. A 200R is like a
no, but I'm talking about the plate. So they have like there's like days where you can go there and rent bikes, and it's just a bunch of people like
having fun.
Yeah, just out there riding them around. Like not racers. It's just dudes that are like, oh, I want to try riding it, or maybe they know how, but like they don't own their own dirt bike, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
And
I'd be game. I don't know if I've ever rode a dirt bike.
It's fun. I used to actually do that.
I might have. I'm just not. I can't trust my memory.
Did you ever like take cool jumps and stuff? I guess what it is. Did your grandpa ever go, oops, I should not have been showing him how to do this one?
So like, we live in Kansas. So I would jump, but it wasn't like real far. I didn't quite understand that. And that 200R didn't have really the ass to get you going too high. No, I think the day that he had a little bit of constructive, don't ever do that again criticism was I was on the dirt road and I got it up into fifth gear maxed, everything it'll do. Yeah. Just singing off the rev limiter. And I stood up, just full on stood up on the seat. And I actually got to where I could do that. And then when it would start to get too low in the gear, I could drop without touching the handlebars and shift down. I had to grab them before I shifted into first because that, just too much of a violent motion. But yeah, he caught me doing that one day and I never did it again. He's like, hey, don't do that.
Was it that calm of a, hey, don't do that?
Yeah, with him it was.
Okay.
I mean, he didn't have to raise his voice.
There was seriousness to it.
There was a seriousness to it. Hey, don't do that.
Mm. Equally effective when done right, you know?
That's true.
It's like the tone,
Right. And it wasn't aggressive. It was just, yeah, you need to not do that. Okay. You know, but he was always one of those that had, when I went to get married, he gave, you know, some of them were advice we all hear. Some of them, one of them was actually probably the most valuable advice I got about marriage. You know, because we'd always heard the don't go to bed angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you guys have done that, but I've experienced that if I'm willing to stay up the extra half hour just to, hey, no, we can talk about it tomorrow, but I don't want to be mad. Like things go better that way.
Way better.
Like, I don't know why that is. I can't give you a science reason. Maybe Brandon,
What you want to going to bed?
Yeah. Why is it so much worse going to bed angry?
Probably just because you're thinking about it, right? You know, you go to bed and you sit there and you think, right, like just about your day, and you're like, man, I should not have said this to that guy, or, oh, I met this new person at work today. Oh, that went really poorly. I bet they're thinking about me right now. Like, man, that dude was so, like that type of stuff you think about, except when you do that and you just got in a fight with your wife or whatever, and you're going to bed and you're just sitting there and basically like you're having the argument in the shower. And so you're just keeping it alive. But if you solve it beforehand, then you don't have that however long you're laying in bed. I imagine it's probably the reason.
I got your scientific explanation. I don't know if I'm assuming it's true, but I learned something somewhere along the line that, and try this out, like you can test this theory tonight. Right before you close your eyes to go to sleep, like have a deliberate thought. Think about something like you need to remember in the morning. And if you will focus on it right before you go to sleep, it will be the first thing you think about when you wake up. So I wonder if, and to test it, don't take my word for it.
I actually do. I do know that.
And so I wonder if, you know, mama goes to bed fucking fuming on you. First thing when her feet hit the floor in the morning, she's still on 12, angry. You're still on 12, angry. Maybe that has something to do with it. Clear the tension in the air before you go to sleep for the night.
I mean, I think if you want to go real scientific on it, right? When you sleep, your brain washes over all the chemicals to get the stuff out through the previous day and all that kind of stuff. So you probably, like when you're saying you wake up with the first thing, so the first thing that's happening again is the whatever angry chemicals your brain releases make you angry. And then you're having, you're stuck in that mode. But once you get through the fight, you go in and talk to them. Hey, I'm sorry. Let's talk about this and that kind of thing. Then that first thing that's coming up is those, whatever those forgiveness chemicals. I don't fucking know, but
Forgiveness chemicals.
Dude, I don't
You got
know.
any of that for sale?
Yeah, no, I don't know. There's a lot of science mumbo jumbo that they probably use, but I'm just thinking that, like, in that sense, that like that's probably, like, you are probably right, that like that first feel, that how you went to bed, that stuff that was going through your head.
Yeah,
that's the first thing you're thinking about in the morning. Those are the first type of those feelings. Because I mean, if you ever, probably in the same vein as, when you go to bed sick and you wake up, like, do you ever have it when you're sick and you go to bed and you're like, oh, I'm feeling terrible, and you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm good now, and then like an hour in, it's like, oh, never mind, I'm terrible.
Yeah,
it's probably like a similar thing to that too, where all that's tied into the idea of, anyways.
Yeah,
we're way off track here.
So another one that he told me, and I think this one was one of the most valuable, when selecting a partner, pick out the 3 character traits that you can't stand about them, your least favorite 3 character traits, and decide right then, if those never change, do you still love that person? Because those 3 things will probably never change.
It's good advice.
That was huge.
That is, I think that's really good advice, that just the idea of, like, because people, in my experience, don't really change. It'll change behaviors and stuff, but like their core, like, someone that's always a desk tapper is always a desk tapper.
Right.
You know what I mean? And is that funny? You like that one?
A little bit. I don't know. Never mind.
But yeah.
You see my eyeball itching, couldn't you?
Yeah. Well, I was just picturing, like, you're thinking about proposing to your wife, and you're just like, she is the absolute apple of my eye, but like, maybe she's a desk tapper, and Joe's just like pacing back and forth, like weighing the goods and the bads, and he's like, you know what? I can live with that. I can live with it.
Right.
Anybody else taps on the desk,
It's over.
I'm out.
Yeah, bro. I mean, that lasagna is legit.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious if she's a desk tapper now.
Yes.
I guess I used a good example. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
That's funny.
But, so, we're getting a little long here, but I want to sum this up to say that I've been very blessed to have a really great close male role model, and not everybody has that, and I don't know what to say to that. This isn't a big story of me overcoming. It's a big story of me already having something really awesome in my life, and I don't know. My grandpa was my superhero, is my superhero. I mean, sometimes I still I actually do contemplate it a little bit. I mean, rolled over a tractor, broken knee, crazy injury. He actually worked on a broken leg for like a month. I made him retire after that because he didn't realize his knee hurt so bad he didn't know his leg was broke. All that, down to the very end, he didn't even want pain management. He married my grandma. I mean, any of those things could have killed you. And none of those did. He lived a long and healthy life, and I don't know. I'm sure there's somebody that has something negative to say, and I'd recommend you don't say it to me, because that guy's my hero. And, encourage people listening, think about that person. If you have that person around you, whether it's a grandparent, just an older person around you, a mentor, whatever, and take that extra time. You're learning more than you realize, and your opportunities to capitalize on that are limited. I think we can't have some person go close to us and not have some regrets that we didn't have a little more time. I mean, you could have spent every day with them, and you'd have regrets, but it's like, man, if I would have picked this up faster, how much further could I have gotten with it, and how much more could I have learned from them, but your opportunities are fleeting for that with your mentors and your heroes and your people that you look up to. So you probably better attack those moments because they are going away.
Did you get a chance to show your grandpa some of the podcast clips?
Yes.
How did that go?
Man, he smiled really big. Grandpa didn't actually know what a podcast was. I explained to him that it's like a radio show, but we put it on the internet. And, I got to be honest, I showed him more than ones of me talking just because I thought he'd probably appreciate that more.
Absolutely.
But he just smiled real big and, had a couple questions about it. And, well, what were you talking about? And so I played more for him and played some more. And so we went on from the clips to a portion of the interviews and stuff like that. And yeah, he just sat there and smiled real big.
Man, that's awesome.
You, last little bit, you just mentioned that about, even if you spend all your time with them, it's always going to feel like you didn't spend enough time or that kind of thing. And I think it plays on I think people subconsciously realize this, but if you think about it with your grandpa, you've never, well, other than this past week, you've never in your life experienced life without grandpa.
Right.
I mean, in the sense that, so people like, I think people subconsciously like, oh, this person's always been here. They're here before I was here. They'll be here after, you know what I mean? And it's until you like have that moment where you're like, oh, this is, he had a whole 40 year, I don't know how long, but 40 years or whatever. Joe didn't exist. I don't know life before that. You've never known life without, him there. And I think there's a thing that will always make you feel like, oh, I did something wrong, because you have a new feeling, right? It's very hard for me to explain. I'm probably sound like I'm
no, I think
crashing right here, but yeah, you get what I'm trying to say.
I can't clarify it in my own words, but I get you.
Yeah. So I just played at the thing of that feeling of never feel like you did enough time, spend enough time, or you reached out enough, and that kind of thing. And I feel like that comes from that feeling of this is the first time in your life ever them not being there.
Right. Well, and part of that emotion is realizing the shoe just is on the other foot now, and that I'd better start doing better because I'm that somebody, or I'd better be that somebody. I'd better work towards being that mentor person. And if I'm supposed to be that, then I need to do better.
How do you emulate a superhero, Joe?
You emulate them. You work. You do what they did.
Practice.
That's pretty much it. So I appreciate you guys letting me kind of air it out and work through it, and on our podcast. Really meant a lot to me.
Appreciate you airing it out with us.
Yeah, thanks for opening up to us, man. It's very good stuff. I'm sorry for your loss.
Yep. Well, I guess we'll catch everybody next time.
Give us a follow, share it. You guys know where to find it.
Comments, whatever. Yeah.
See you guys.
Bye.